Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome back to Sahara TV. And on the line right now, we have Kenya's leading musician. His name is Eric Wainaina, and he's going to join us via telephone. And Eric is going to give us a brief rundown of exactly how he saw what's been transpiring during this historic presidential election. Eric, welcome to Sahara TV.
Thank you very much, guys. Nice to be here.
Okay. Now, Eric, we're just going to try and introduce yourself to our viewers. You are an established musician, having started music when you were quite a kid, I think at 7 years old, and you started piano, and you obviously were at Berklee University, one of the prestigious schools here out in the States. But your message in the music after you took off was all about social consciousness and how your voice helped others conscientize them about what was happening around them. And basically, you also denounced the violence that was used as a campaign during the 2000, like 5 years ago, in Kenya. And you also promoted the unity that was formed after that violence. And today we're seeing a quite different picture where there has been some kind of display of democracy, where there's been the first kind of presidential debates and everything like that. So today every Kenyan got out to vote. How was your assessment so far?
Well, it was very peaceful, Fungai. There was an amazing turnout of voters. I think even higher than we had at the referendum, which was about 2 years ago.
Right.
And at all polling stations. I mean, there might have been some delays with the beginning of voting, but that the delays were compensated for with the polling stations staying open for an hour or two after the official closing time to compensate for that. And everywhere there's been peace. It's been even in hotspots, places that have been traditionally known as hotspots.
Right.
The voting went very peacefully.
Yeah, but we've also received from where we are, we're based in New York, we've also been receiving some reports of violence, not as much as, 5 years ago, but we've had that maybe 10 or so people have already died. Was this violence, according to you, connected to the elections? Because recently we've just received a report that there's been a bomb blast somewhere at the police station. So what would you say this kind of violence is emanating from, and what could that mean?
Well, there have been the spots. Up in northern Kenya, there's a town called Baragoi, and there's also a town called Garissa, where there had been violence that has flared up before the elections began. These areas are known particularly because of there's been problems with ethnic communities in the area,
right?
Fighting about sort of who has a rightful ownership to the land there. Particularly because, but it's definitely political machinations, because this is land that for example, up in the north, that is being has been targeted for use by countries from the Middle East that want to farm there. And so it's very sort of arable land, and is very, how do I put it, is very valuable to some people
Right.
who want to be in positions of power when that deal comes through. There's also situations out on the coast where a group calling itself the Mombasa Republican Council has been fighting to get, their call has been that Mombasa is not part of Kenya. And the problem there has been people at the coast have felt very marginalized. With development sort of moving at a steady pace around the rest of the country, but people at the coast feeling that they have been left out of the development agenda.
Right.
This is also because the area, the coast, is where Kenya's tourism is a major principal area for Kenya's tourism, and so a lot of people find themselves without title deeds and being kicked off the land by unscrupulous means, sometimes even through the use of violence, or through the use of the rhetoric of the willing seller, willing buyer, where people who live on the land might be actually too poor to afford to buy it. So these problems predate the elections.
Okay, now I've also been noticing that the most prominent contenders in this race are obviously Uhuru Kenyatta and Mr. Raila Odinga, who's the current prime minister now. We have also been hearing that there's been some kind of rivalry that has started years back. And one is Kikuyu, one is Luo. Can you explain to us what the meaning of all this might, imply?
Well, the rivalry between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga actually goes back to their fathers.
Right.
Uhuru Kenyatta's father was the first president, and Odinga's father was the first vice president. And after about 3 years after independence, they went separate ways because Odinga was very much a socialist and Kenyatta was very much a capitalist. So it was an ideological battle. One wanting to go pretty much west and one wanting to go east, and this was at the height of the Cold War. And so those tensions have continued have continued to grow in a sense. There's been a lot of mistrust between the Luo community and the Kikuyu community. In urban areas, that tends to be less because you go to school with people from different communities and you grow up with your neighbors from different communities. But in the rural areas, this mistrust continues to be there. And right now, as far as the voting is going, it's very binary. I can't even say there's any sort of battleground states or battleground counties. It's all about counties are going up 90% in favor of one or the other.
And one of the candidates, actually, Uhuru, was being charged for inciting violence in the previous elections, and I think he was actually heading on it, being pushed to the ICC. Do you think, with the turnout, let's say, as we stand, it's only 10% of the votes that have come through? Do you think that if he happens to be the leader, there's going to be some kind of peace? What do you predict out of this outcome?
I'll tell you, first of all, Funga, I think it's a very sad moment for Kenya that a man like Uhuru Kenyatta, who's wanted by the ICC, is getting as many votes as he's getting. For me, this is a major point of concern. It seems to me that the Kikuyu community and the Kalenjin community have chosen pride over justice. While I'm not saying that Uhuru and his running mate Ruto are guilty, they are suspects. And other than the fact that the ICC is one of the highest ranking courts in the world, I think it's a very bad example for Kenyans to see that it's possible to be wanted for a crime, to be a suspect in a crime, but to completely ignore the ramifications and stand for president. This is, in no uncertain terms, Fungai, a very, very sad moment for Kenya.
Right. And I can imagine after the results come out and after this goes through, what the people are going to be feeling. But anyway, I guess the people of Kenya are speaking. Now, you as a musician, you obviously have one of those discerning voices. Now, I've heard you speak in certain interviews where you say, I'm Kikuyu, but I decide to sing in Luo. What exactly the kind of message are you trying to give to your listeners when you say that?
I think ultimately I'm saying that we're all the same. The song that you're referring to actually was inspired by the fact that about 20 years ago I was dating this Luo girl, and I mean we were dating. That was it. I mean we'd met at a club and we were having this relationship, and at different points from members of my family I'd hear sort of things from my extended family, not so much. My parents loved her to bits, but my extended family would be there like, oh well, it's nice that you're dating her, but we hope that this is not the woman that you're gonna marry. So those, for me, it was an attempt to counter that kind of thinking,
to bridge a gap.
To bridge the gap, you
right.
know, because ultimately, I tell you, from guy, if you're lying on the street, you've been involved in some kind of accident, and someone comes and offers you help, you're not going to ask them what tribe they're from.
Right.
When you're lying in your hospital bed and they begin to pump blood into you in some kind of transfusion,
and I've seen,
you're like, where does this blood come from?
And I've seen that you've actually done that in terms of working with people like Oliver Mtukudzi, who's obviously Zimbabwean, and you did a song called Twende Twende, which means
That's correct.
let's go, right? And
Yes.
the message was very distinct for the Shona speakers and for Zimbabweans, because Zimbabwe has had a similar experience, and almost at the same time you guys were going through, we had a violent election period in 2008, and a lot of people were killed, a lot of people hurt, and a lot of people displaced. And we are also looking forward to an election period in this coming July, and our referendum should be going through sometime this March. So the
Yeah.
message that you brought in that song was of unity, was of standing together, was of moving forward. And I feel,
That's
as a
correct.
Zimbabwean, your voice, people are listening, and your voices are being heard. What is there for the future?
You see, Fungai, the problems facing Africa are so much larger than tribe. You know, when I think about, for example, the tensions that flared up the violence in the Rift Valley in 2007, there's land problems there that come from the natives of that area being displaced off the land by the colonialists, and that land being handed to Kikuyus. And when you look at it, we're talking about injustices that took place 60, 70 years ago. And so other than the natives who belong, whose land that is, there's people who've lived there for 70 years and know no other home.
Right.
And so the problems are really, really deep, Fungai, and they need to be resolved by politicians who have a desire to get to the bottom of it and have equitable land distribution and find justice for these people. And so at the moment, we seem to be selecting leaders who are promising one thing, but ultimately just want to get into power to find a way to continue to enrich themselves. We need, and the politics that is needed at a time like now is a politics of fairness and justice.
Right.
And that's I think that's a similar problem across Africa. If it's not land, it's education. If it's not education, it's healthcare or sanitation. It's the fact that young people can't find jobs. So ultimately, it's for me, it's a crucial time for Africa. It's not about finding politicians who have found themselves in that position by inheriting the positions or by being wealthy. It's about finding leaders who are going to make the government be the great equalizer between those who are born into lives of privilege and those who are born into lives of poverty. And so whether it's Zimbabwe, whether it's Kenya, whether it's Egypt, it's about finding the right leaders. And Africa is not doing a very good job of that right now.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us on our program today. And whatever the outcome of these elections, I'm sure it will be clear that the Kenyan people would have stood up and spoken. So we appreciate the time that you've given us, and obviously the insight that you've given us. We'll still keep monitoring the results, and hopefully hope for the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fungai. Thank you so much.
Stay on the line. We'll be talking to you in a minute.